Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another review for The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 5, the third to last for the season. So, I am your host from the X Bottom Podcast, Alejandro, with me with my rotating co-host,
Rick, how you doing?
Rick. I'll just kind of get it off my chest now. I feel this was the week where probably the wheels fell off for me for the show.
I'm
And
surprised. I actually thought you were going to tell me you liked it. I
yeah,
thought it was terrible. I thought it was really, really bad
yeah,
myself.
it was more kind of like I didn't necessarily find the episode completely too terrible, but I felt like all the decisions of casting, choices
Mm-hmm.
made, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, and focuses made.
Well, and no, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
Hmm.
Like all the little changes that they made just to effectively end up in the same place now.
Hmm.
So why change in the first place then? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Hmm. Exactly. That's
I,
why.
I'm surprised. I did not think we were going to align on this one. I really thought that I would say
Mhm.
I didn't like it and you were going to say no, you thought it was great. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of shocked by that.
Yeah. Do you remember that I sent you just a
This is
in
a
for just a
cigarette. Yeah,
cigarette?
yeah, I still don't actually know what that means. So,
Yeah. Usually when you smoke something, it's like, man, I need to vent off
uh,
something because I'm like
I follow you now. Okay.
because
I
it's like
the
ah
whole time I was thinking it was a reference to something that happened, and I'm like, I don't understand what he was
yeah.
getting at with that.
Yeah, I was just trying to be more subtle, kind of like to give you like my impression of kind of where it was, because I did enjoy last week's episode, but this
Yes.
one now, seeing where we ended and kind of like the choices not made before, whereas like kind of what we talked about in the again when we try to compare it to the show and the game and all of that, is like I remember last week vividly says like by the time we were here in the game, our bloodlust was heavy as we were playing
Mhm.
as Ellie. That was
Mhm.
kind of like the point, that we were like so bloodlusted that by the time that we got here is
Mhm.
the moment where that felt like crossing a line.
Mhm.
And we should, as players, we're supposed to feel kind of like, is this really where I feel like we're crossing the line like into savagery at this point, like for something that, yes, even though we feel justified at that point in the game, at least to start kind of like, if you start feeling uncomfortable about that, that was kind of like the point of it. And I thought that was like a good point of the game. I started noticing that for a show that's adapting that, that's still kind of like at its core is bad choices being made in the name of revenge being taken. The bloodlust has been very minimal.
Mhm.
In fact,
Yeah,
Ellie in the show.
this is where the lack of combat
Hmm.
in the show has really affected it.
Yes.
And I mean they can't help this part, but this is where the lack of interactivity most certainly hurts it.
Hmm.
Right? Because when you're fighting, not I mean not the infected so much, but when you're fighting the people
Hmm.
in the game at this point, like
Hmm.
you feel the anger and just like you said, bloodlust
Hmm.
in every stab that you make as Ellie and every shot you take and all that stuff. You don't get that because you figure as of this point I don't think Ellie has killed a single person, right? Yeah,
Only
no,
one.
I mean Nora, but I'm not referring to her. I'm saying like like just generic unnamed WLF. I don't think
Only
she's
one.
killed.
Only one
Oh, right,
at the
right,
TV
at
station.
the TV station. Yeah, you're
Hmm.
right. But yeah, like by this point you've killed dozens, if not more than that, right? And
Hmm.
like this is, and again, obviously there's not much you can do about it being a non-interactive medium, but
Hmm.
um, my biggest issue, and it extends beyond just one character now. I mean, I've obviously spoken ad nauseum at this point about not liking the Bella Ramsey
Hmm.
cast. However, I've also come to the realization that it's not just her. Like
It comes down to
again,
the writing.
it's her writing is terrible. That is not Ellie in any way. Is that Ellie?
Hmm.
And this episode, all of a sudden now, that's not Dina anymore either.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like that is completely not Dina after that whole little like terrorist speech that she gave to Ellie, and it's
Hmm.
like
To try to
that.
psych her up
Yeah,
into
it's
feel.
like that was nothing about that is what Dina ever would have said in the game, and
Yeah.
it's like that you just ruined the character. Like, and I'm not blaming Isabella
Hmm.
Merced. She's just reciting a script as she's told to, right?
Hmm.
Um, just like Bella Ramsey. I mean, in her case, is what she's just reading a script as well. But it's like somewhere along the line here, somebody adapted this and didn't understand what they were adapting.
Hmm. Which is nuts considering the creator of this thing.
You
It's
would
kind of like
think. You would think, right,
it's
right,
like all
and
over it.
it's like it completely lost the entire feel of the game. It completely lost just the the general direction, I guess,
Hmm.
is a way to put it. But yeah, I am. I genuinely at this point, I mean, I'll finish the season obviously, especially
Hmm.
because we do this. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm going to watch the third season. I don't know if I'm even going to bother at this point.
Yeah, I think out of just morbid curiosity, I would do the third season, but it's
Mm,
just more like I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt from the TV show standpoint of like, okay, you changed things because b- both you've lost faith in humanity to understand nuance, and
mm,
this is a different medium that's more passive compared to like being more active. And I just kept kind of like trying to make sense of all of this, but then by the time that now we got to this point and remembering like very hard. And this is something that I'm at the LSM Discord where we actually have a Last of Us separate thread where we actually talk spoilers, and we were all kind of like ranting about it
oh, really?
on Sunday streaming.
This has been a pretty well disliked episode then, huh?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was because more like it's almost said it's not the problem of the episode per se, but like all decisions leading up to it is just kind of
Yeah, yeah.
boiled down to here because there's good stuff in this episode. I thought.
I saw both Dustin and Lockmort on
Mhm.
Twitter say something along those lines. Like
Yes.
I think I saw Lockmort say,
Hmm.
whether you like it or not, there's no denying that the
The
game is
show is
vastly
inferior.
superior to this, and
Yeah.
I don't even think that's a question at this point.
Oh yes, no, the game is like complete. I made the joke that I actually appreciate the psyop the show is doing to kind of like make people actually appreciate how the story was told in the game. So I'm like, if that at the very least opens the eye to people that be like, you're just being bitches about this.
They're just
That
torpedoing it on intentionally, huh?
exactly, I actually like it that way because it's like so many people have so many things to criticize about the story. There's some good faith arguments I've heard that I'm like I could see it. Obviously, there's ones that we completely tune out because we know
Mm,
it's out of ignorance and just kind of like
sure,
just
sure,
pettiness.
sure.
But I feel like we have said it many times that the intentional messiness of the jumping around and the intent of why scenes are happening. I even kind of mentioned it in a recent review that I did for Clear Obscure Expedition 33. It's almost like the messiness is the point to kind of land the
Mm,
emotional gut punch. And
sure.
that's kind of like the point of why that story was told. Because I know I've heard a lot of people say, I would probably like Last of Us Part 2 story if it was told linearly. I'm like, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
would dislike it
You
more.
can say that retrospectively.
Uh-huh.
I think if you were to actually put yourself in the moment, you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
because
It's all about
it
reveals.
wouldn't have any impact. It would not
Exactly.
have any impact, and like it would just like what we're happening with the show here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing has impact because we
They
revealed
flip
all the
it.
big reveals right away.
Yeah.
And this is, if you remember, this is what I said right off the bat. I was like, I'm gonna wait and see, but my feeling was that it was probably going to greatly affect how everything felt, and I don't even think there's a question at this point that that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because even think about it this way, like at this point, we didn't really know even as a gamer that Ellie knew what
Correct,
happened.
correct, right.
Like that was still always sort of hanging over us as the game slowly showed flashbacks that she ended up knowing and
Mm,
putting that question into your head of
right.
then why are you doing this? Like you were
Exactly.
so pissed.
It's like, okay, then what was the point of this big revenge plot, which you then
Mm-hmm.
obviously find out at the very end, which
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, it's still how it's going to end, I'm sure.
Exactly. But
But
and I feel like us as, and I can't even say it like in that Discord. I feel like the albatross of us that are the gamers is that we know all of this and is hanging off like as a scarlet
mm,
letter almost all the big reveals that's probably really hindering our enjoyment like in
mm,
general that and we're always gonna be losers when it came to that. And what I got from the people that are just TV viewers don't know anything about this episode, the thing that they liked about this episode was literally the last 10 seconds
and see, I thought that might have been the worst part of the episode
showing
because
Joel.
oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the part with Nora.
No, no, no,
Um,
no. Yeah, it's after that. Like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, I
literally.
got you.
Mhm,
That said, that last 10 seconds does show a major issue with
mhm,
this, and that was, and this is not to just keep harping on the same thing, but the decision not to recast Ellie, and
mhm,
it's not an anti Bella Ramsey thing.
mhm,
It's a she looks exactly the same now. So
mhm.
like, I mean, when you saw the sequence in the game,
Yes.
he looked exactly like she did in the first game. She looked
Uh-huh.
much younger. So
Mhm,
that it like that again, it's not a complaint about Bella Ramsey. This is a complaint about the decision
mhm.
not to have a different actress play her so that
Yeah.
she looks older in this season.
Mhm.
It actually does affect kind of
Yeah.
the way that this works now.
That picture, that set picture of Caitlin Deaver and Pedro Pascal, like in the like, like when they were filming the last episode and they're both hugging next to each other. I'm like, that's Joel and Ellie.
I didn't see that, so
You should have
I'm not
seen it.
sure.
It was like I saw it because they were kind of like hugging next to each other. And it's like, god damn, like really, like Caitlin Deaver looks
She does.
like
She
this
kind of looks like
current
both
Evie.
characters, which is interesting
Yeah,
because
it's really funny.
She does look like a skinny Abby as well, but you're right. She
Mhm.
does also look like Ellie. So
Well,
you
what's
couldn't have played
actually
either character.
exactly what's actually funny is that intentionally, I think Neil Druckmann had mentioned this, that he wanted Abby to kind of have an air of Ellie to her in some way. That's kind of like why Joel kind of took to her when he rescued her from like the zombie outbreak thing.
Was he talking about the game or the
The
show or
game, the
just
game,
okay, okay,
the
okay,
game. Yeah, that
gotcha.
reminded her a little bit of Ellie, even though physically they look different. Like they don't
Mm,
look too similar, but that was kind of like the air. And in this case, it's just funny to think that Killian Dever
mm,
is really it could have been worked both either way.
mm,
What
mm,
screwed her over was that the show started way too late, and she was
mm.
too grown up
Right, right,
for like the young Ellie role. They would have had to like
right.
really recast that. That was kind of like the problem because she was always eyed for Ellie.
Mm,
But that's kind of like what you're saying, that I buy Bella Ramsey's young Ellie, but not old Ellie. Now that we're like
right.
in old Ellie at this point, especially without any bloodlust and all that, how it's conveyed, how she when she goes at Nora at the end of this episode, just feels way off and way
It
different.
does. It does. And like I don't. So this is tough to describe, but
Mhm.
that scene, which see, I say so real quick before I get to that, I will say I know you did not dislike season or episode two, excuse me, like I did,
Mm-hmm.
but not for me, as I've mentioned before, I really didn't like it. I would say this is the worst episode of the season so far,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Yeah, my least
Um,
favorite.
but two, or rather, the two most important moments so far, I truly feel that this show has messed up.
Yeah.
And that is obviously her killing Joel, which I know some people don't agree with. I
Mm-hmm.
have seen others that agree with me, so I know I am not alone on that. And I really think they screwed up this part.
Mm-hmm.
And this part is supposed that when killing Nora, of course, when she does this, it is supposed to be where now the seed of doubt officially makes its way into Ellie because
Mm-hmm.
she starts to really question if what she's doing is right, if it's
Mm-hmm.
worth it, blah 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 blah. And like I think it was part writing and part just this is not a role that Bella Ramsey is particularly talented at, like or not a role, I'm sorry. This is not a like emotion that Bella Ramsey is particularly talented at portraying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's fine. Like she never really never played this kind of character before, so I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But like just screaming, "Where is she?" and hitting her on the leg with a pipe, and that was not Bella. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was the writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That didn't convey the brutality of what actually happened.
And
And I in the game, correct, right? And I think it was IGN's review where it's like, I don't know why it didn't show what she did. It's like they didn't show it in the game either, and you didn't need to because it was more violent by not
mm-hmm.
showing it.
Yeah.
However, they showed part of it, and it undermined it because they actually showed her hitting Nora's leg, whereas you don't ever see her hit Nora.
Yeah.
You just see it. I don't know if you
From
see it
her
from Nora's
perspective, you
perspective,
always
but
see it from her.
the camera is at least from her angle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just see her swing the thing, and the things that she says to just show how truly mad she is at that point. By mad, I mean crazy, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even say here. Like
Yeah.
she in the game, she says something like, "I can make this quick, or I can make it so much worse," or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's like that's truly the ramblings of a lunatic to say that. And
Mm-hmm.
by not having Ellie in the show say that, it just seemed like somebody who was throwing a temper tantrum and
Mm-hmm.
just not and mad not because they're not getting their way, right? And it ruined the entire moment, and that moment is so important for what's to come.
Yes. And
And it was a massive disappointment.
yeah, to me, like the worst part about doing it like this, especially because this is the first time she offs one of these people in the show. So
You're right,
this is now number one.
right.
They have not seen any bloodlust. They've kind of just been kind of going around evading, and she only killed that one dude that was just happened to be there before they got
Mhm.
pursued into the tunnels in the last episode. Is that by lacking that bloodlust and making this the first time that you uh that we see her like kill one of these, like it just to me this feels like, are we really just starting to get this feeling right now with literally one episode left, because we know
Mhm.
that next week's episode is just a flashback.
Mhm.
So it's like you're not driving home the kind of like the messiness and like the boneheadedness of this
Sure.
decision, other than you being constantly told by others being like this is a bad idea, kind of like what they did with Jesse here.
Mhm.
Immediately that it felt like instead of making the character come into that realization, it's a lot of spelling us what's happening,
Mhm.
be on top of realigning the board to be somewhat similar to kind of like where things were, despite the intent of how we got to the scenes being completely different. Suddenly Tommy and Jesse are here now.
And
Suddenly they're gonna.
willingly separated, which
Uh-huh.
for two people who run the like military, if you will,
Uh-huh.
at Jackson, and their number one rule is what?
Stick to.
Always stay in a group. And
Mm-hmm.
what do? They go into completely unfamiliar territory
Hmm.
and separate. For
Yes.
what reason? To cover more ground. I mean, that's just so nonsensical. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that is why you should have just stuck to how you did in the game, because at least in the game it made sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
And remember, it was like completely that. Jesse came to be with Ellie and Dina. He
mhm,
came for them, not
sure,
for Tommy.
right, right.
Like
And the other thing
Ellie
is
and Dina
like
came for Tommy. That's the
like
thing.
so the whole thing. This would have been the end of last episode and the beginning of this one. The whole thing with like, even though she's pregnant, she's gonna go with her on this, which doesn't happen in the game. She stays
Mm-hmm.
behind, right?
Yeah.
What was that? What was the point of that? It was for nothing. It was for
Yeah.
nothing
Mm-hmm.
because when all's said and done, now she's going back to the theater with
With Jesse.
Jesse anyway. So
Yeah.
it's like, again, why did you make these changes then? Like, if you
Mm-hmm.
were going to actually change, I don't, not obviously change the general thing of what happens, but
Mm-hmm.
like, if for some reason you didn't have Jesse go there at all, which I mean, you do kind of have to because of
Mm-hmm.
obviously what happens at the end of
No, day three.
theoretically this
Mm-hmm.
season, theoretically this season. Um, but like, why just change what you already had that worked then? I just cannot understand this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was really stupid, and I will die on the hill that it was the wrong decision,
Mm-hmm.
I can at least understand their logic for changing the spores.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea. I won't defend it, but there at least was reason to it, right?
Yeah, and they try to justify it a little bit of being like, these are the oldest of infected. That hospital
Right,
was the first case,
right, right.
which is ironic.
Well, in Seattle, but
Yeah,
yes,
in
yeah.
Seattle, that was the first case, like a reported case of this infection, which is
Mhm.
ironic because the first COVID case in the United States was also in Seattle. Ironically, it's so
Oh,
funny.
really? I
Yeah,
actually don't think I realized that.
yeah, it's so funny how that kind of like lined up.
I thought it was
But
someone on an airplane, but I don't know.
it, it
It
flew
doesn't
it flew
matter.
to Seattle.
Oh, is that why? Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's why like that was like the first case when I was like, oh shoot, the first case, really? Yeah, I remember that vividly back in March 2020. But uh, like them trying to justify it as like because it's the oldest like group of infected, that's why there's sports here and not everywhere else. Obviously, it feels like a weird retcon of like if you're always gonna do all this, why change it like in the
But then
first
also
place?
here's the other issue. You're right. That is how they try to justify it.
Hmm.
But here's the problem with that justification: the people who have been infected for at most 2 days
Hmm.
are spitting out spores.
Yeah,
So there goes your entire logic of it, right?
exactly. It's like
Like,
it just makes it messier.
it's
Like I
it's
mean,
just it's why they should not have changed it. Due in part to the fact that that's how the damn cordyceps fungus actually works.
hmm.
Like, to change that made no sense at all. And actually, the other thing about it, like their logic obviously was we don't want to have to cover the characters' faces. Well,
Hmm.
Ellie, you never had to cover her face anyway because since she was introduced from minute one, they knew she was
Hmm.
infected. So she never wore a gas mask in the
Hmm.
entirety of Last of Us One,
Yeah.
right? And how often in the show are Joel and Ellie going through infected zones? Not that often.
Hmm.
So it's like there was no reason to really do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Remember, I always say about there wasn't much infected in it, and that's why I didn't feel dangerous and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, they just did not deal with infected very much at all, and that's there was no reason to ever make that change. And now it's starting again. The trickle down is happening, right?
Hmm.
Everything is starting to catch up to it now, where they
Exactly.
have to try to make up new rules for things, just like a certain song that
Hmm.
even though. Again, why they changed the year that it took place, I don't understand. There was
Yes.
really no good reason for that. Like,
Exactly. But
if they would have done something with the year 2003, I would go, okay. They didn't do anything with it, so why not just make it in 2013? I
exactly, it's like
don't understand it.
I do love that this finally confirms to everyone that a few people ever told me that it didn't matter the choice of song. Then why the frick is that song here also?
Yeah,
Like it's like that's you accepting that that song was such a important backbone in points in that story that kind of like that song was the
absolutely.
temple. It
But
started
then, unfortunately, they took out, at least as of this point, the scene where he first sings it to her because
Mhm.
they changed the damn beginning. It was
Exactly.
like, that was why I said, I was like, I can't believe they changed that because the beginning of that game was incredible.
Mhm.
And they totally changed it to what we ended up getting. And it's like, now, maybe they'll have that scene in the backs
Mhm. Yeah.
in the flashback. I don't know. However, it not being in the very beginning before she actually starts to sing it, it
Mhm.
has no resonance now, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like to anybody who doesn't know the story, that doesn't mean anything. The
Mhm.
first time you hear her sing that or play it or whatever in the game, it hits you like a truck because you
Mhm.
know what it means.
Yes, especially when you listen to the lyrics. It's like it's such a
Yeah.
never has a song that's not even original for a game that it's a real song has
Yeah.
become so like bludgeons its theme so obviously, but then when you realize and how like integral it is to kind of the narrative that tells you, because it literally keeps informing you and reminding you of what's happening to Ellie because of the lyrics said. When that happened in the show, I rolled my eyes because I was like,
Yeah.
man,
It
this
has
it
it
has
has
no
no weight.
rest. It
It
has no
has
weight.
no
See,
weight.
you're
Yep.
only like the only thing that you would know if you for some reason know the Future Day song, if you're a Pearl Jam fan,
Mm.
like you will recognize that and then start thinking is like, did that song exist by then or things like that? Is this like
Yeah,
a
it came out in 2012, I believe. So that
2013? It came out in October 2013, but the first official singing of the song
oh,
was at a
okay.
concert in July of that year.
Okay,
That
okay.
was what Neil Druckmann, when people asked him why Future Days existed in the game, when
Mm.
the end of the world happened in September,
Right,
when that
right.
song was fully released in October, he mentioned this like, I know this because there was a concert in July that year
And,
that Joel
and,
could have listened to.
yeah, I think there's like a note somewhere, something that the Joel references go. He didn't say Pearl Jam directly, but I think he
Mm-hmm.
references going to a
A
concert.
concert. Exactly. So it's like, and I know some people are like that. That sometimes they will hear like before songs are released. Even like I see now in the TikTok era, a lot of singers have like songs that something started to go viral because they started singing somewhere and they kind of catch the audio before they officially release it. It's like that made sense, and it made sense, and they managed to make it work in the game, but it doesn't work here.
Mm.
And they just added because you're just basically admitting the importance of that song, but then
Mm.
you already messed up by introducing that song way too late,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that the title of your first episode this season was called Future Days. Why didn't
Was it
you
really?
say
I actually
yes?
I didn't look at the name. I know this one was called
Mhm.
whatever
The
the
press,
reference to
yeah, the present I think it was
it
called, or
no,
a second, no,
it was in her love or
in
something
her
like
love,
that.
like it's
Yeah.
kind of like the a reference to the
The prophet,
prophet.
prophet,
Yes.
right? Yeah, yeah. Whatever their little
Hmm.
saying is with her. But now I will say it wasn't much, but there was at least a good scene in this, and that was the scene in
Hmm.
the even though it was too short, the
Hmm.
scene in the
In the
park
forest.
was very good. Was very
Yes.
good.
Yes, it was
Um,
like it captured kind of like the, I would say like, because it was after an additional scene where they had to fight the stalkers. It was
mm,
Dina and Ellie here, and that's kind of where they introduced Jesse, because obviously Jesse is introduced differently in the game when he's arrived in Seattle, because he catches Ellie in
mm,
Hillcrest when she's kind of like
right,
going through. Obviously,
right.
kind of what I mentioned, they completely skipped Hillcrest at this point.
Right. I
So
actually kind of figured they would because I mean, that
that's
was kind of an action sequence that wasn't really all
mhm.
that
Yeah, there's
necessary
no
to this.
story in Hillcrest. That's
Yeah, right.
gameplay. That there's environmental storytelling. There's cool
Oh,
details
sure,
you find
sure.
there, but it's nothing that would have been adapted. So I was okay with that being skipped, and them showing the ritual here was, because I'm trying to remember. It's like yes, you actually can see one of these rituals as Ellie.
You see it happening towards the tail end.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't hear them saying things, but you see them
Yeah.
stringing up the
Mm-hmm.
WLF guy and
Yeah.
disemboweling him.
Yeah,
Yes,
you only witness the true ritual in the Abbey side, which is one of
correct.
the which was the Paris Games Week trailer they showed, because that was
It
when they introduced
it
Abby.
was the
So
second trailer, if I remember
mm-hmm.
correctly.
Yes, and I remember that vividly because it was like super violent, because it was like the
But you
Clipper
remember
wings.
a big prediction was that was Ellie's mom. Do you remember
Yes.
that?
Oh yes. Yes. And everyone thought it was gonna be that way because of the title of the game, Part Two, because it was like they were taking homage to Godfather Part Two. What happens in the
Mm,
Godfather Part Two? That's a dual storyline
mm,
of the present happenings of Michael Corleone and the
mm,
past happenings of Don Corleone at the same time.
mm.
And that's kind of like when it's, everyone thought it was like, are they calling it Part Two because they're gonna do that, and we're gonna, and this
Right,
character we're seeing is kind of like Ellie's mom in the past and
right.
all of that, and also kind of like that weird religious, like I would say they perfectly nailed like the to the
They did
T
do a
how
good job
that,
with that.
yeah,
They
it's
did do
like
a good job with that
everything
part.
with the Surface have been like pretty. I would say with the
It's
WLF
been the
and
highlight. It's been the
yes,
highlight of the show so far. Yeah,
exactly.
that and Isaac. Isaac has also been the
Mhm.
highlight.
Everything with
But
WLF and the Surface, I feel it's
yeah,
been handled perfectly, because it's kind of like
mm,
its own separate pocket, and it's the things most ripe for build up, kind of why we love last week's episode. That felt like
right.
proper, like, oh, this is good
It
details
felt
to
like the
know.
game. It was the only time so far that last week's episode at least felt like the game.
On top of
Or,
being,
yeah, yeah. Sorry.
it felt like the game, and on top of that, gave us details that were not in the game. So it was kind of like
Right,
the
right.
double win Of like
Right.
this is kind of like
And
what the
and that's
show.
kind of what we're watching for. Is it's like, well, we know nothing is going to be as good as the game.
Hmm.
We didn't realize how not as good as the game is
Yes,
going to be.
more so this
But
season than before.
right. But well, the last one did a pretty good job. They just kind
Hmm.
of screwed up a couple areas, but they
Yeah,
did do a decent job. Here, I don't think they've done a very good job at all.
yeah.
Um,
It's
but
much more harder for them to like really adapt what made the
yeah.
second game special too.
And
And that.
again, they lost their nerve and didn't stick to their
Mhm.
artistic vision
Mhm.
and cave to try to appease to the masses much more. And it's I don't think there's even a doubt that it's hurt the overall product.
Yes, and to me, like the worst part is kind of like cutting off any, at least for us, because it, again, hard to separate for us. Is like I feel they're just making it very clear that the revenge is happening not because for any other reason. They're making it so obvious, even saying the whole thing of like, you know what he did, and she's like,
Yeah.
I know. It's like I was like,
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I know that conversation happens, and I know Nora basically. I don't know if she says exactly what she says in the show here, but
she says it, but Ellie
she
says
does say
nothing.
something along the
Yeah,
lines of I'm glad he's dead or something like that. I do remember
yeah.
that,
And
but I
there was the scene where it's like, I hear sometimes I hear the screams myself when I'm sleeping, and then when she says that little bitch got what he
yeah
said is
yeah yeah
exactly
that was
what Game
okay
Nora said.
okay
So
okay.
I thought Tati Gabrielle, which is the actress for Intergalactic, I thought she did good in that
She was
scene.
okay. I mean, she
Yeah,
obviously wasn't in it very much. She had
exactly. Very
a
few
grand total of 7 minutes of screen time through the show, but
in three episodes. Yeah,
well, I
but
mean,
for
we'll probably see her a little bit more in
next
because
season.
depending how they do it, because she obviously you do encounter her early as
Hmm.
Abby, but
But at the beginning of the
um,
day, it's there.
but yeah, I mean, you think about it now, so we know next week is almost assuredly going to be nothing but flashbacks, right?
Yeah, it's confirmed.
Which
It's a
they've
and
already confirmed that.
yeah,
Okay,
it's just a flashback episode, and people say it's the best episode of the season for obvious reasons because people.
there's a character in it, right?
Exactly, that's why people love it.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the TV normies that reviewed the season kind of like they were like it's pretty good, but we prefer the first season because this season doesn't have what we loved of the first season. But there's one episode that reminds you why, and people say it's this one because of the
Well, I
you
mean,
you see the trailer, it's the
it
flashbacks.
was so like here's the funny part, right? Is talking about season one again. Is I always say I didn't like episode three.
Hmm.
Everybody did. I did not. I thought it like
Yeah.
my argument was happiness has no place in this universe, but that's obviously not quite what
Hmm.
I meant because the reality is this episode, or I'm sorry, this section of the game,
Hmm.
um, does have a point, and like so that was the issue for me was
Hmm.
episode three of season one. It didn't progress the story in any way. It just was kind of like it's almost a side story that led to them getting the truck, right? Which obviously
Hmm.
isn't how it happens in the game, but that's not even the
Hmm.
point. Here, though, it works because it does show something important. It shows probably the moment where Ellie, at that time, prior to
Hmm.
what ends up happening, um, does really get pretty close to Joel. Like, right? Like, she really does
Hmm.
choose to, like, be really good friends, if not father-daughter with him, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And, like, it also does directly steer events that then happen later. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the difference in my opinion as to why that works versus why episode three did not.
Yeah, the
Um,
episode three for last season worked more for the normies because the first two episodes was very hard for the show to kind of like convey what made it special compared to, let's say, The Walking Dead and all that. Because TV land has been filled with zombie shows and all that. A lot of people are like, that episode kind of showed a humanity that's usually not in this show. So like, we kind of people found like an emotional hook that convinced them that what made Last of Us like sing that it didn't in other zombie shows. That was kind of like what I read about why that episode worked so well. Whereas a lot of game fans like yourself remember it's like, yeah, they took out Bill's town in
yeah.
this in this entire from this entire
And I argue that now, when they announced that what's his name? Is his name Keith Offerman? I think is
Nick
the actor.
Offerman.
Nick Offerman.
Mm.
When they announced that he was cast, I'm like, oh, that's a good cast. He looks like him, but it wasn't Bill, and
Mm-hmm.
not by his doing, but by the way he was written. I'm like, that's just not Bill,
Yeah.
right? And like
And
so
so
that was kind of my issue.
yeah, they
Obviously,
rejiggered
we
him.
know there were people that had issues with that episode
Yeah,
for
first
different reasons.
exactly.
I am not one of them
Yes.
because the reality was anybody that didn't realize that he was a gay character wasn't paying attention because
Exactly. Yeah.
it was pretty clearly told to you, right? Like
At the end of it, almost at the end of his sequence.
Ellie's thing was a little bit more subtle, and actually
Mm-hmm.
I did outright outmiss it until they basically said it. I thought she was bi after
Mm-hmm.
having seen or after playing
Left
what's it
Behind.
called? Left Behind, yes.
Hmm.
Then he said he was gay. I was like, or she was gay, right? I was like, oh, okay. I just didn't
Yeah,
realize
I
it.
would say
But
that because I played that first game many many times. Like her being gay was never like even
yeah,
on the
they don't
list in
really
the main
bring up
game.
her
Yeah,
sexuality at all in the main game.
yeah. She only knew she had a best friend, which was Riley.
Right, right,
Yes, but it never read as like something else. It called her. It was my best friend Riley, and she was the
right,
first to
right,
die. She literally said that. So it was like it was
right.
Left Behind that made their friendship more intimate.
What
So
what was also kind of odd about it, just to get this is including the game.
mhm.
Did you ever happen to read the American Dreams comic?
I always wanted to read it and I couldn't. Like,
It's not that great to be perfectly honest with you, but that's where Riley is introduced.
mhm. I knew
Um,
that.
okay, yeah, like the reality is in that comic, there's zero sign of any kind of like
Mhm.
attraction between them, and I mean it works. Like it's not like it's not like the game acts like they were long lost lovers or anything like that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Right? It just kind of was thrust upon them, but nevertheless, so yeah, I had not gotten that Ellie was outright gay. I just thought maybe bisexual
Mhm.
until not Joel, Neil said as much. I was
Mhm.
like, okay, that's fine. But leading then to Bill is it's like the game without directly saying Bill is gay
Mhm.
outright tells you Bill is gay. So I don't know how they missed that.
Yeah.
She finds male magazines.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're porn necessarily, but they
Yeah, I
might be.
think they are.
They either are or they're. But you know, she does reference his dick, so they
Yes.
actually are probably
Yeah.
right. They probably are, and she references the pages being sticky.
Mhm.
What other evidence could there be to tell
Exactly.
you that that was his sexual preference?
Mhm.
I guess you could argue maybe he was bi, but either way, he knew he had a preference for men, right?
Mhm.
But that was not my issue with that episode. My issue with the episode was how it played out.
Mhm.
And again, like I didn't have an issue with the museum sequence. In fact, I think most people would agree that it was one of the highlights of the game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, the museum scene is wonderful. It's like
yeah, like it's probably not my favorite part of the game because most of my favorite parts of the game are actually on Abby's side,
mhm.
but it's very much up there. It was absolutely one of the best parts.
I
And
think.
actually, I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned on here or not. I had played through both of the games fully on stream to my wife and some of my
Mhm.
friends so
Yeah,
they
yeah. I
could
think
kind of
you
see what's happening.
mentioned it.
Okay. When I got to the museum part, I basically said, like, everybody, if you're not paying attention, you want to pay attention to this part because this
Mhm.
part is really cool and you kind of are going to want to watch what's going on. And every one of them was like, yeah, you're right. This part was
Mhm.
awesome, actually.
Yeah. No, it's like the museum part is like my favorite because it was like
Mhm.
the rawness of having lost Joel, like still like early on, and then kind of seeing kind of like their relationship. It
Mhm.
was like even for a game that's not ostensibly like about them being together, like just the few times that you see them together is just like such a powerful reminder of their
Mhm.
relationship and kind of like
Right.
why you was still at that because remember that was still the first flashback. We still were
Sure.
not like in the at the point where it's like, are we going too far here?
Right.
And it was still kind of like a reminder of like look what they took from us,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like what was driving you. Even though that's in flashbacks, kind of at the very end, sees the doubts when Ellie finds that the Firefly logo. It's kind of like
Hmm.
just by looking at that, you always know that it's kind of percolating. And it was in the second flashback where they kind of talked about it, and then the third
Right.
one,
Where they show where she's starting to really have
this doubts.
questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that leads to the third one where
She
she
went
basically
for the.
says, I want to know what's happening because you're not telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm. And then when she figures out, is like that's what implodes their
Yeah.
relationship, and it's clear that episode's gonna get there, like
Oh yeah.
based on the
I'm
trailer.
guessing it'll have some variation of all three of those.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have. I mean, obviously, definitely has the first.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the sequences showing it has the first, and
Yes.
it definitely has the third because we saw the part where she was yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
I have to guess it's going to have an abridged version of the second one as well
Yes,
because
and even
that is what leads to
mm-hmm.
her going back to the hospital for the
Yes,
third
and
one.
the second one, like we already kind of saw a element of like what happens there when Tommy's training Ellie with the sniper at the in the
Okay,
premiere.
right,
Yes.
right. Although it looks like it's Joel doing it because she
Mm-hmm.
was following him, wasn't it? But you're right.
Yes,
She did have Tommy's
sniper
sniper
training
rifle.
in
You're
the
right. Yeah.
yeah in the first episode of this season. So that's kind of like what we know that what's happening. And now in summary, like that's kind of like the irony of this episode is like not really much happens. It can be boiled down like this, literally. Ellie and Dean start at the theater talking about where to go. They talk about triangulation. They kind of start walking to where they're supposed to be. Like Dina tells her that she shouldn't like how can I say this waver on her revenge because it doesn't matter like if it was justified or not. She has to kind of like complete it. So I was like, I thought that was like very clunky. Then they run into like
Yes. Yes.
they run into like that place where it's the stalkers. Jesse kind of bails them out of there, like scolds them from being like reckless and all that.
Mm.
They meet the Seraphites. They witness they witnessed
Disembowelment.
the disembowelment, and then kind of like they got surrounded, and then Dina randomly gets an arrow like put on her
Yeah,
leg that sticks.
that was a little bit clunky because
Yeah, it
it's like
looks so,
they're
yeah.
cracked shots and she was standing there, actually kneeling down, not moving.
Yeah,
They could have walked up and shot her point blank in the head, and they hit her and missed her and hit her in the knee. And
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
like that was so cheesy. Like
Hmm.
what they should have done, if they wanted to have that happen,
Hmm.
was have them make a noise and them running away, and then that's how she catches a stray arrow. The way that
Yeah,
it happened was so bad.
exactly. Yeah, I would have loved if it was them trying to run, and then she kind of like got hit as running, and
Right,
yeah,
right.
I
At
would
least
have.
then you could understand why they would not have got,
Hmm.
a shot where they're going. When she was sitting there not moving, they could have, whoever it was,
Hmm.
obviously a Scar, could have lined up the shot perfectly and got her right where they wanted to. It was
Yeah.
so bad.
Yes, and then that's what kind of separates them. Like Jessica, we take her to the theater, and then Ellie just so happens to be outside the hospital, and then she just goes to the hospital. And we get an abridged version of she
Which also might be the worst guarded like
hospital ever.
fortification ever.
And remember how fortified it is in the game? There's
It
like
was a bitch to
12.
get in there. It was
Yes,
a bitch to get in there. Yeah.
yeah, getting there secretly is like it's one of the most satisfying gameplay sequences in the
Oh
game.
yeah, it's
Like
hard
completely
though. Like
skipping.
like like if you try to do like as pacifist of a playthrough as possible,
Mhm.
it is really hard to get through that without killing somebody.
Yes.
Because the way that they patrol and the way they're set up, it
Hmm.
is really 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 difficult to do it.
Yeah, and it's an abridged version of she basically sneaks through down a hole, which it's a reference to the game. There's a hole that you can kind of sneak behind. Like that game has
Right,
multiple pathways that you can kind of enter to
right,
pursue Nora, and
right.
that's one of them. So I was like, ah, cute. And then immediately, suddenly, she's already there to face Nora, be like, turn around, like
Right,
doing
and
it.
like again, it's so clunky because don't forget, like when she was going to the hospital, I don't remember if they in the game. I don't remember if they even knew that Nora was there. I think she was going there for medication
Hmm.
for Dina because Dina was sick
Hmm.
from the pregnancy,
Yeah.
and when she was there, she overheard somebody on a radio talking to
Hmm.
Nora,
Nora,
and
and
then
then that's
and then
kind of
you
like
call
what.
through the vent and you see her, and that's why
Mhm.
Ellie goes, "Oh, I can get what I need here."
Yeah. Yes, because kind of like if I try to remember that I made a mistake in not playing the game because I platinumed a certain other game that I talked about last week, and I'm playing a new one now. So it was like I didn't have the time to kind of like double check it. I think we talked about it last week, and that was my bad. But hey, new
That's
games,
all right.
people.
That's all right.
But I do remember. I think it was like Jesse was gonna go with Ellie, but Ellie told her, "Don't worry, because I'm just gonna go for medicine." And she kind of got
Yeah,
reckless with
yeah,
her, so
yeah,
I
correct.
think.
Yeah, correct.
But I would have to play again just to kind of double check with that. I'll make a mental note for that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I may be like combining 2 points
Hmm.
because there's a point where he goes off. Yeah, but this is day three when
Hmm.
he goes off one direction and she goes
Yes,
the other.
yeah, and that's because
But that is a different point because that's when she goes to the marina.
yes, and that's when Tommy's like on his killing spree at that point,
Correct,
and then
correct.
Jesse's like, we gotta go with Tommy,
Right.
and then that's kind of why they split because Ellie's like still
Because
so.
by that point, Ellie has said, "Yeah, if we can get Tommy, we'll go." And
Mhm.
that part right there is when it showed she was full of shit
Mhm.
because he said Tommy's that direction, and
Mhm.
she goes, "But Abby's that one."
Uh-huh.
And he goes that way and she goes
And
the
then
way, which showed she was full of shit. She
mhm.
never planned to stop pursuing Abby.
Exactly. So it's like, and again, it's like all these little details. Like, are you gonna be able to convey all of that with the little time we have left now?
Yeah,
Like to be able to kind of
yeah.
like convey
There's
that.
if you think about it now, they have backloaded all the important shit so much now that there's no way they could do it in one episode. That's what they're gonna
Hmm.
have to do.
Yeah, and
So it's gonna be really sloppy.
exactly that, and that's kind of like why I said that this was the episode where every like the wheels fell off because obviously we got to that Nora scene. They pursued. There's kind of like similar references to like the game. Kind of like there's a shot of her trying to open the thing, and you see kind of like the guards that's straight from the game. There was kind of like a shot of they were like when they're trying to shoot, and then she just kind of pushes through the doors. Like there, that's
Oh
one
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
sequences where you're like
yeah.
tapping the button to
Right, right,
as you're
right.
pursuing Nora and all of that. Obviously there's no game like there was no fighting down because if you remember in the game it's like in the sport area
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when Nora kind of falls
They
in
send a few of them down after her, right?
with mass and all of that. So it's like they just kind of left it as an introduction of the sports, which I would say from a production quality standpoint, I feel they did a great job with
From a
the
visual area, it looked
yes,
great. It
yes,
looked great, no doubt about it.
it looked
Which is
nasty.
it's just like this is another reason why you should have changed it because you could make stuff look really freaking
Mhm.
cool this way. And
Yes,
instead you made the tendrils which just look stupid.
yes, and
Right?
exactly the tendrils from like the mouth to
Uh,
to kiss people and
right.
infect them that way. It's like one of the
Ugh.
that's the one of the to me, the fingering from last week and the tendrils are like the nastiest, like most unnecessary things that happened in the show. That
Mm,
felt very just HBO nastiness.
mm,
And then we get to that torture of like where she tries to torture like the whereabouts of Abby out of Nora.
mm,
And the thing is that in the game, she tells her, "I'm not gonna tell you anything." After she tells her, "We're gonna do it the easy way, the hard way," and he just
mm.
kind of gives you the option to just like smash her.
Yeah, it makes you press it, I think, right? She
Yeah,
doesn't like it tells you press square.
yeah,
Like it
press
doesn't
square to
you
for
can't
quit.
move, like it makes you do it.
And then like it's later on where you see like Ellie's like completely distraught and like all bloodied and like
Right.
bruised. That she tells that Nora told her at the end. And this one they just
Mm.
stops at smashing the leg that in the show's
And
case.
again, the leg, not
Yeah,
even like the
the leg.
body or the. I mean, she wouldn't hit her in the head if she's trying to get information right away, but
hmm
the leg would accomplish nothing.
Yeah. The
It
only
wouldn't even hurt the most. Like
yeah.
I don't understand what the point of that was.
The only thing that it accomplishes is like from the TV show perspective is the fact that Abby like really went ham at Joel's leg like at the
Mm,
beginning of her torture. So it was
right,
kind of like as
right.
a they're trying to pit them as both a Dark Ellie and like a light and
Yeah,
Dark
you're
Ellie. That's kind
probably
of like
right,
yeah,
actually.
that's kind
Yeah.
of like the only reason why they. But the problem of doing it that way is that it blunts the impact of the scene
Yeah, it
because you
does.
never see what exactly how like Ellie massacres Nora,
Sure.
like in fact
It,
like
it, it leaves it up. It leaves it up into your head when you
yeah.
know she's getting beaten,
mhm.
bloody and bruised.
Yeah, it leaves into your imagination to think that
Hmm.
she really like was like maybe just one of the members wasn't even the perpetrator, and she probably got it the worst out of
Hmm.
like how she got bludgeoned by Ellen. This one we only know that it was the leg, and then it cuts out.
Hmm.
Then it cuts out, so it was like okay, cool. And then added that extra scene that this wasn't in the game of like Ellie waking up to Joel, be like, "Hey, kiddo," just
Yeah.
kind of as a, "Oh my
Yeah.
god."
We obviously know what he's waking her up for, but
Mhm.
obviously, only show watchers
Exactly. And for the TV show, it's
thought
like
it
kind
was
of
going
like
on.
you lost this very beloved actor and he's back 4 episodes later. Oh my god. So it's like you still get
Not for
some
too
love.
long, so don't get too
Yes.
used to it. But
Exactly. And now we
and
know that's
that's
gonna be
that's
the
another
case.
thing too. Is like another reason why I'm not sure putting all the flashbacks in one episode is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
You got him for one episode and that's it. You'll never see. Well, I guess you'll see him briefly
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the show,
Yeah.
but you won't see him again now. You did playing through the game. No, not at first, but
Mm-hmm.
when you saw the first flashback, you realized, oh, cool. I'll actually still see a little bit of Joel because I'll get
Mm-hmm.
some flashback
Yeah.
sequences. Well, now you're gonna get it all at one time,
Mm-hmm.
and then one theoretically at the end, and that'll be it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
that kind of like takes away almost like a dangling carrot to keep you going. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially for in the TV show's case, Pedro
Mm-hmm.
Pascal is a big name. It is
He's
the big
the
name.
he's
Yeah.
the big name, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like way different that like in the game that it's like a more it's you don't care much about the actors as much as like you care more about like the characters.
Sure, sure.
So that's kind of like a different kind of like dangling carrot, yeah, from that angle.
Mm-hmm.
So, but and that's kind of why I keep saying that it's like, man, this was the moment where I was like, I started now really souring on season two. Is
Mm-hmm.
just knowing how much time is left and then how like the pieces kind of got rearranged to, how you said, arrive at the same point and then realize it's like we got to the same point and we don't feel not even remotely close or what we
Sure.
should.
And and again, like with the whole making all the changes just to end up in the same place,
Mm-hmm.
except all the changes
Have been worse.
have made for a worse product.
Mm-hmm.
So, being as that you still ended up in the same place, you would have been better off sticking much closer to
Yeah.
what you already had.
And even like trying to see it from like the TV angle perspective, where I hear from people that are just watching the show and don't play the game, what they are getting out of the season is like a what's the point? Which good because that's kind of the point
You
a
mean what's
little
the point?
bit.
What's the point of the revenge plot? You
Yeah,
mean? Or
exactly.
okay,
Like
okay,
what's the
okay.
point? Which is
I
like
think about
okay,
what's the point of the season. I'm like, well, that's really not good then.
yes, but that's the thing. That could be that could be like a meta narrative because that kind of
Mm.
is the point also of the game. That like, what's the point of pursuing all
Well,
of
if
this?
if you look at it
Mm-hmm.
through an objective lens, as opposed to somebody who's loves Joel and wants that revenge,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take long for you to start to go like, this is probably not a good idea.
Yes.
Like day one, it's like okay, they're kind of in over their heads, but around day two is when you start going like, yeah, it's time to call this,
Mm-hmm.
and they just keep pushing on and pushing on it,
Yeah.
and then on Abby's side, to be fair, they actually did a little bit smarter, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, she did everything stupid before you played as her.
Uh huh.
Now it's more of a what she's doing is actually somewhat just in most cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and like for the most part, it's like she really, when she makes the dumb decisions, what leads up to obviously the end of Act 3,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that. I understand, but that wasn't
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I said Act 3, Day 3. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
It's like I understand, but that wasn't the right call, and it just restarted the cycle anew over and over and over again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
And the thing that I love about like in the game, what it shows of Abby's side is kind of like seeing the aftermath of a fulfilled revenge, and even then,
mm-hmm,
because of the cycle, like kind of
mm-hmm,
the endless cycle, kind of like her realizing that it didn't fix anything. She's
right,
trying hard to find ways to feel like she's justifying or trying to make do for what happened. And even
right.
then, it's for naught because it still like made her lose
Mm-hmm,
everyone in the end. So
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like
Well, and like
it was a
I
great
know
reaction.
I I've seen since day one a lot of Last of Us 2 fans or not whatever hated Manny because of him spitting on Joel's
Mm-hmm.
corpse and all that stuff. But I actually thought that again, if you look at it from a neutral perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like okay, that was kind of fucked up that he did that because he's being a douche. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, knowing what you understand why he did it. Um, I thought actually when you play Abby's game, it actually showed that he actually was a pretty good guy,
Yes.
and like I don't even think he did anything
Mm-hmm.
in Joel's murder outside of obviously be
Mm-hmm.
with them to help it.
Yeah.
But like then watching him get killed and completely just
In such a random way.
nonchalantly, it was like
It
it's
hurts
like
actually.
yeah,
Like,
and like they don't dwell on it, but I think that the idea is that was supposed to have kind of fucked with Abby because
mm-hmm.
Abby was pretty good friends with him.
Oh
They
yes.
were they were roommates if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, they
like
were
when
roommates.
you're in the beginning, he was her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not roommates. They were obviously in a sports
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Stadium.
but well, not to stadium. They were in the box. Like their room was like a box, but
Mm-hmm.
they were roommates in there.
Mm-hmm.
And like even when you're walking around like cleaning up the room, she makes jokes about like him leaving all his shit everywhere and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like it's clear that they were pretty good friends.
Yeah.
Um,
And that to me is
especially
like the brilliant,
especially with what happened between her and Owen.
and that's the brilliance of of in the game. If
Right,
we're not spoiled, kind of
right.
then trying to flip that on your head of like now you're gonna put you in the shoes of someone that kills someone that you really care for, but this is for you to really see
And
that
now
they
you're gonna
still
see they're
work.
not as evil as you think they were. Right.
Exactly, because it's like in a world that's not black and white, it's like shades of gray when you
Mhm.
understand that the Fireflies at the end of the day, like what they were trying to do was a noble act that was gonna require a heinous act for
Right,
the sake of the greater good, but it was not a
right,
mustache twirling, we're gonna
right, right.
dominate the world. But that's not what they did. It's like they were doing it, and it's just kind of like the brilliance of The Last of Us. Kind of like the morality is that they were doing a good act, and then Joel, in his own
Right.
selfishness, having already lost a daughter, it was not ready to lose another one for the sake of a vaccine that they say they work. But if you understand in real life how vaccines against fungi actually work, it's not as black and white as it may seem. It's more.
Although Neil Druckmann has said that he wrote the story intending it to be that Jerry was going to successfully cure the
Mhm.
issue. I,
Exactly.
I know that that's not super. Well, actually, that's not explained at all in the first one because at the end of the first one you kind of think it's left to your imagination. That's what it would work or not.
Mhm.
When you play the sequence in the second one, I believe it's when you're playing
Yes.
as Abby. No, I'm sorry. It's when you're playing as
Ellie.
Ellie. It's when you're playing as
You
Ellie. That's
find the
right.
reporter.
And you find the notes of that. He basically says, "I figured it out. I know how to do this."
Uh-huh.
Like through a couple notes and recorders, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And like I have always said, that is what the brilliance of Last of Us One is.
Mm-hmm.
Is at the very end you find out that Joel is basically the villain of the game.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Oh
both
yeah.
the hero and the villain, right?
Exactly.
Now, a lot of people, for some reason, this went way over their head, and they were
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh no, no, he was a good guy and protected her because she was his daughter." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, he made a selfish act because 20x years later, he still felt guilt over not being able to protect his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
so he used her as a surrogate,
Mm-hmm.
and in doing so, damned any chance of humanity
Yeah.
fixing itself."
Yeah, and a lot of people are just so like stubborn of realizing that Joel was never like a good guy. Like,
It's comic book hero logic.
mm-hmm.
Like everything is either the good guy or the bad guy. It's
Yeah,
like
and
no,
he's not.
that's why I love The Last of Us. That is why I love that
Yeah.
universe so much. There is no such thing as a good guy in there.
Yes,
Like
and I would.
I guess technically you could say Dina and Lev are probably and Yara by the same
Mm-hmm.
extension
Or
are
they
pretty
put it.
pretty innocent in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every I guess Mel really didn't do much wrong either. She
I
unfortunately I
think
guess
that's the thing is like everyone's more of a shade of gray because that's the thing. Like, I know that for example, like Greg Miller will always say like Joel is the bad guy, and it's like
yeah, he was the hero and the bad guy.
here
That's
is
just
it.
it.
It
Yeah,
was like it's
yeah,
more like it's a complicated. It was like
right.
he did a good act out of like in his eye a good act out of his own selfishness, a selfishness that everyone else saw as wrong. And that's kind of like that's kind of like the beauty of that. It was like because it was not like a rah bad guy that way. It's like a broken individual that was not gonna relive his trauma again. And trauma sometimes makes you like do actions that
And unfortunately, that exact thing is another reason why I have such a massive issue with this season,
mm-hmm,
and specifically not having the beginning the way it should have been. Right,
mm-hmm,
the beginning kind of shows like when he's talking to Tommy in the game.
that he's traumatized
Right, it clearly shows that while he stands
by
behind what
his
he
actions.
did, he also knows it was not right to do. He
Yes.
knows it was the wrong decision, but he
Mm-hmm.
stands by it.
And we briefly
You
only see
don't
it by
have
when
that here
Gale
because
gets
you just
back.
have him talking to Gail,
Mm-hmm,
and all he does is stand up with a tear in his eye and say, "I saved her," which doesn't mean anything, but it's
mm-hmm.
to Gail, I mean. But it doesn't have the same impact as when he was talking to
I
Tommy.
would, and now I want to say with next week's episode being a flashback, I want to see if he has
We're going to see what's his name in this one
mm-hmm.
since we know
uh,
Eugene. We know Eugene. Clearly, Eugene's going to come into play
yeah,
into this one somehow.
he's in a promo picture that they released
Oh, okay.
recently.
I did not see that. Okay.
Yeah, I saw him. He's like played by Cypher from Matrix, from the original
Which
Matrix.
which one's Cipher?
The guy that betrays the group.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about. I know you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about.
That like I see Nebuchadnezzar is like, oh yeah, you piece of shit, and then you just shoot him like
Yeah, yeah. I didn't remember what his name was, but now that you say that, I know
mm-hmm.
it's a guy that sits down and says something about he could taste the steak when he was
Uh-huh.
talking to Anderson. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that one. So
Yeah,
Cypher is like the
interesting.
yeah. So Cypher's gonna be Eugene, and they're gonna show what happened to Eugene in that one, obviously, because they made a Gale too intrinsically tied to this season. Now for us to we have to see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. It's too because nothing's gonna be left to the imagination in season two. We're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be told everything at this point here,
Mm-hmm.
which is because
Yeah.
thank you humanity for showing that you have no handling of nuance.
All right. I will say for overall views
Mhm.
of the episode, I think the strongest statement I can make would be the first thing I said when the episode ended. I looked at my wife and I just said, "Well, I'm at least this is exactly what I said to her. I'm glad I played the game, so I at least know how this story is supposed to go."
Yes.
And I think that actually, like I told you, I was starting to get some hope. This
Mhm.
episode killed it. This episode killed any hope I have for this season and the next one. I have very little hope that it'll be a good adaptation when all said and done.
Mhm.
It'll be an adequate enough one, but The Last of Us deserves better than adequate.
Exactly. That's the thing that it's like it's going back to again to like what I was saying with what I know about TV viewers because I love hearing from them because I need to hear that perspective.
Mm,
At least them saying what's the point. It's a slight of like okay, at least you're kind of railroading the right track that way,
mm.
but then at the same time they tell me is like at the same time this feels very listless. This
Mm-hmm.
feels very
It
like
just it hasn't been handled quite right, and that's the problem.
people are saying it's like why does really happen. I got other people being like it just feels like nothing like the whole type what is happening like it doesn't feel like
Mm.
nothing's really happening.
Right,
I
right.
get that because you're not getting action, you're not getting like
You're
you're
right,
not
right. You're not seeing her fighting the greater WLF, and
mm-hmm.
and since they cut out, I think 3 members of them who
Uh-huh.
Ellie directly kills one,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And then the other ones
Which is
disappear.
Nick. She finds Leah dead,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that's the only two that she would have encountered by now. But
Yeah.
like by not having those guys in here and not having her dealing with the WLF at
More
large
actively.
at this point, it is taking away a lot of feeling of danger, as we keep
Mm-hmm.
saying. Like somehow they have managed to put more infected in 2 episodes than
Yeah.
there is in the entire 2 games combined,
Uh-huh.
and it still doesn't feel as dangerous as the game does.
Yes, because
And
else
it's like,
it's a mix of the
yeah.
dangers of humanity and the infected. That's the beauty of the
Well,
balance in the thing.
and in Last of Us, the truly terrifying thing has never been the infected. It has been the infected have been more of
Mhm.
a plot device.
Yeah.
The humans in The Last of Us are what is terrifying
And
about
that's
that
kind of
world.
like what annoyed me of the penultimate episode of the first season because I thought
Mm,
at least it had the danger of David. I felt like in its religious, it had that, but then it felt slightly undercut because the beauty of that whole sequence is that you see infected, you fight it together, you feel
mm.
like yeah, we're together here to fight like this terrible thing, but until you realize no, this guy is even more scary than the
Yes,
infected.
yes.
It's seeing that
Uh,
contrast of the
The,
both.
with David, they did a good job of getting his creepy
Creepiness.
charm, but
Mhm,
still charm, right? Like he
mhm,
still had. However, they completely missed like the total creepiness of him,
mhm.
which, and it's like that's not the actor's fault. That's the way it was written.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's like yeah, you got half of it right with David, and you didn't
Hmm.
get the other half. And unfortunately, obviously, that's pretty important because what happens with David is a major turning point with
Hmm.
Ellie.
Yeah.
And I mean, they obviously have it happen. And
Yeah.
to her credit,
Hmm.
Bella actually did do a pretty good job in that part when she
She
has to
sold the
kill him.
she sold the trauma of
She
like
did,
having
yeah.
to
She
honor.
so I'll give her credit on that one.
To me,
But
it's just more that like the beauty of that sequence is the fact that there was still infected there, and it was at the point where it was like we were
mhm.
like 3 episodes at the point without any infected, and
and
even then
and
like the
they
finale
and
only had
jo-
one in a
Joel and
flashback.
Ellie by that point had not fought nearly enough anything, let alone infected. But
Hmm.
even the hunters or whatever they're called that
Hmm.
David was the head of,
Yeah.
and it was like that was kind of important, right? Is all these random people that you've been fighting.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, once you get into that general area, of course,
Hmm.
and then you find out that now all of a sudden you're with their leader
Uh huh.
and all this, and by not having them ever fighting them, it takes so much away from that whole thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of like what people forget, that is like there is a point to the combat. There is a point
Hmm.
of why
Sure,
things are there because it
absolutely,
just helps build it. And now,
absolutely.
and because that's the thing, like a revenge plot with barely any violence, as we've been seeing with this season. That's why I'm seeing a lot of people that why they're feeling like this feels
Yeah.
very listless. It feels
Yes.
very
Yes.
like it feels very pointless that
The
way.
the city feels empty, and it
Hmm.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
Once they get past the fuck Fedra gate,
Uh huh.
right? All of a sudden, the WLF are everywhere there.
Hmm.
And then obviously, you get to certain points where, of course, it's the scars.
Yeah.
But it's like by not having all these WLF, it doesn't feel at all like it
And
did
you know what
anymore.
annoys me the most? The third episode had the right idea, because remember when they arrived to Seattle, I was like, this seems pretty empty. This should be easy. And then it ends with a freaking army.
Yes,
Whatever. Where's that army?
I'll tell you where it is. It's heading to the final battle with the
Uh-huh.
scars. That's
Yeah,
where it is.
exactly.
And for some reason, they decided that that's going to be why they don't need to have them at all watching the city. And it's like they still had huge amounts of that army throughout the city
Mm-hmm.
because Seattle was a complete lockdown by the WLF at that point,
Mm-hmm.
except for the one small island that the scars had control of.
Uh-huh. That they
And
wanted
it's like,
to go take control of, like at the end
correct,
of the
you're
game.
right, right. And it's like this does not feel like an army. It feels like a squad that they're going after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like it's ruined the whole general feel of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. To me, and to me, like the biggest crime, I feel it, but I don't quite blame it, because I have also know this is the reason why some people prefer the first game over the second game, and is that I just prefer the game when it was Joel and Ellie. I've heard of many people in the TV side is like, it's just not the same without Joel and Ellie. I think that's why probably next week's episode is gonna
I
work.
do not disagree with that. I don't disagree. I just happen to like the way that I mean I like the story of two better.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, even though there's way more points in the game in Last of Us 2 where you are by yourself, the show feels much lonelier for the character, even though
Mhm.
at almost all times Ellie and Dina are together, whereas in the game they are separated a good bit.
Exactly.
They feel so much more alone because there's nothing else going
Yeah.
on anywhere.
Mhm. And it's more like what I always say, what's brilliant about the second game is that it is still a Joel and Ellie story.
It is. Yes,
It's
it is.
just not what you
With
think.
Joel. With Joel and right,
But
right.
it really, it's at its core, it's still a story about them,
Sure.
and that's kind of like the beauty
Absolutely.
of that. It's still a story about them, despite the fact that Joel is off an hour into the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like it's still a game that's still centered around them, like in
And
inherently, indirectly. That I feel like the way that the show is rushing through parts, not giving like the weight of certain things, and kind of like the emotional core not being so strong, like hanging in your head like it is in the game, that I feel like people maybe in the TV side of things are missing more the Joel and Ellie
mm-hmm.
stuff, because at least that was more substantive
Mm-hmm.
than what we're getting here. Because this was the episode again, wheels fell off. I'm starting to feel the lack of substance, the lack of the choices. That then by the point, like when we get to this point, and I just sighed instead of feeling anything, that's
Mm-hmm.
when I knew that I was like, yeah, it's a miss, like at
Mm-hmm.
this point. And the things that the next week's flashback, I believe, is the best episode, but it's like that's just gonna be a one-off.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and you're gonna like watch
Hey,
this.
that's what I was saying. You're getting all of your Joel in one episode now
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because of the way that they did this. Now, obviously, you only would get him in the first half of it anyway. You don't get him, so you don't
Mm-hmm.
get much Joel in the
Yeah.
Abby side, of course.
Yeah.
But like you still had Joel events and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that spaced out throughout it. dumping them all into one episode. I'm sure a lot of that was done for financial reasons because
Hmm.
they only had to pay Pedro for one episode then.
Yes,
As
and
well,
on top of his
I guess
busy
I guess
schedule.
technically three, but you get what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
Um, it was like, but yeah, you ruined what made those flashbacks special by putting them all together. I mean, I didn't see the episode, so I can't say that for sure.
Hmm.
But I am going to guess when all is said and done, I will say, yeah, that was probably our best episode yet. Yeah, that
Hmm.
was a good episode. It still was a mistake to have them all together.
Hmm.
I'm going
Yeah,
to guess that's how I'm going to feel.
yeah. It's very hard not to feel that way,
Yeah.
especially seeing like how outside of that, when you were wanting these revenge tale to really feel that way, it's just not being handled well,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And I feel like I tried, I've been very given the benefit of the doubt to this entire thing and being higher on almost every episode at this point than even Rick. But this was the moment where I felt like the ways really like ankled me like to the floor.
It all finally caught up to them.
Hmm.
Like, don't forget, like I said, even though I didn't like the first two episodes, I was starting to trend more positive.
Hmm.
This one,
Yeah, this one was the prove it to me because it was
yeah,
like I remember it vividly. People can check that episode. I said it's like I want to see if they sell me
yeah,
on the revenge tale
yeah.
in this one because I feel like they've been a little too loosey goosey. Not as I don't feel kind of like that urgency that you felt. And this is not me just as someone that has played the game that obviously we mentioned that many times, but it was more just as kind of like I want to see if they find an angle to try to like make me feel those same things. And then when we got here, I was like, they did not.
Hmm.
Instead, they're trying to spell it for us
Right,
in awkward ways that I'm like, telling me it's not the same as showing me.
right,
You're not showing. And by
right.
not showing, now that we reach a very important moment, just as important as the one in episode 2,
Sure, absolutely.
that feels even I feel this if this episode feels even more bungled
Hmm.
than the one in episode 2
Oh,
because
I totally agree.
yeah,
Even though I had massive issues with that episode, I think this one
yeah.
did it way, way, way
And I know
worse.
and me having the TV perspective hearing the people is like the second episode were gangbusters to TV only people because like it caught them like completely off guard. I was like, okay, it worked for them. This the TV side is for them. For this one, I'm like I'm hearing way more negative because like if you're asking why everything feels so pointless right now, you're sort of in the right track. But I'm also feeling kind of like they're not feeling as engaged, and I'm like I
Mm,
don't blame them if you're feeling
mm,
that because it's like I feel the substance is missing.
mm.
Alan
Yeah,
Sepinwall from Rolling Stone kind of said it's like I win revenge is like it can be like a very complicated thing, but the way it's focused in the season compared to like the cleanliness of what the story meant the first season, it means that it really feels like nothing's really happening. I'm like, I totally get
mm.
it. I 100%
Yeah, I
get
mean,
it.
you're completely missing Ellie's path of destruction,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Yes,
Right?
and that's so important for the
Mm-hmm.
turn. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like now we only have and now it's like we only have one episode left, and then we have to
Mm-hmm.
wait 2 years because Isabella Merced, what did she say recently? We're starting filming
Oh
early
yeah, yeah,
2026. I'm
yeah,
like, whoop,
yeah,
good luck with that because
yeah.
it's like, oh, that's gonna be tough, especially if like
Mm-hmm.
if it ends really inconclusive as we know it will be based on where they're supposedly stopping the story.
Mm.
I was knowing that's gonna be like a tough one.
So I will say I just thought of something.
Mhm.
I said that I don't even know if I want to watch season three, and that is true. I probably have to because of I'm going to guess either probably episode 6 for Abby, the thing that's going to show up there. I do want to see
Oh
that.
yes,
I do want to see that
there was
because
there was
the reality is
hints.
I don't see how you could possibly not have that. I
Yes,
like that's pretty freaking. It's obviously only an action sequence, but it's pretty important.
and
So
not only
I
that,
believe it'll be there.
did you notice in the pre-cold opening of this week's episode with the kind of harasser and like the Asian lady that's kind of like
Mhm.
smoking and I kind of like explained that she had to lock her friends down there because of the
Right,
infected
right,
and all that. Do you
right.
notice that she mentioned that there were no rats?
Yes.
Everything's been cleaned out. That it's kind of like even the rats are
Uh,
out.
well, although
Is
the
the
thing
Rat
about that
King?
was, yes. Well, I wasn't going to say what it was, but the thing
Yeah,
about that is, I don't think that's got to do with it
yeah.
because don't forget that thing is in the very bottom basement, whereas that was B1
Hmm.
that she said there was no rats.
Yes.
I think it was more the fact that the rats were getting away from the spores. I think is what that was trying to hint at.
I did read it as kind of like a wink and a nod that it's just
Oh,
specifically not the
I see what you're
rats.
saying. You think it was just supposed to be kind of a. I thought you meant that in some way was hinting to the Rat King, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, if
It
it
was
just felt like it just
supposed to be
felt
a
kind of
name reference, basically. I get what you're saying. Okay.
yeah. So that's why I was like, interesting that you
Yeah,
specifically
I
mentioned
thought of that
rats.
when she said it too, but
Yeah, so I was like, okay, and here's also my thing, like, I've been like watching about a bunch of stuff with Caitlin Deaver in it. Like obviously we barely got any Abby right now over here, but she's a strong enough actress that I kind of want to see how they handle the Abby side of things from her,
Mm.
because I do believe on her range more than I believe Bella's at this point. This was the
Yeah.
episode that finally like marked it. It's like
Yeah.
mistake,
Yeah.
mistake. That this the one like this finally highlighted is like the moment you need it. Like it's like obviously they
Mhm.
wrote around it, tried to make it more like a cold
Mhm.
disassociation. I'm like, what made it effective in the game, and I hate to say it, is the raw destruction, the
Sure.
anger, not just like a
Sure.
disassociation.
Again, she almost seemed like
Aloof.
she well, like she was just throwing a temper tantrum,
Mm-hmm.
not not driven by emotion and rage and fury.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like just not getting her way, and
Yeah.
she was kind of pouting about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the way it came across to me, and I was like, oh God, you guys. And again, that comes down to the writing too, because as we said,
Mm-hmm.
she only has two lines, and for some reason they chose not to say them. like
Yeah.
and it was like that showed how truly broken Ellie's mind was at that point. Not having that there and showing that even through words, she would go to any length at this point
Mm-hmm.
to kill Abby. It was like you screwed everything up. You
Yeah.
screwed everything up because that was supposed to be the point where she decides in her head, there is nothing that I won't do to exact my revenge. But
Mm-hmm.
then she does it and all of a sudden goes, man, I might have done this. I might have gone a little too far here.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like we only now have one episode of
Hmm.
meat for them to sell me on that, and I'm like, that's just not. I just 100%
Yeah.
believe that's just not gonna work.
Yeah, I agree
You're
with you.
gonna tell you're. It's like you're gonna tell us the theme, but
You
he's
could
not gonna.
almost have an entire episode just at the marina.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we're gonna have the marina plus a whole bunch of other crap leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly.
Yeah. And there's like so much that needs to happen in that finale, and I'm
Well,
like,
I'm sorry, not well. Obviously, you got to have the marina, and then you got to go back to the theater because there's no way you can't have that happen. I mean,
uh,
that's how day three has to end.
exactly.
So it's
That
like, yeah, you got to unless that episode's gonna be an hour and a half long, you're gonna have to really
yeah,
make something not good.
yeah. I can imagine like there's a lot of day three that's very gameplay oriented. And kind of like we said, we see how they work around like
Mhm.
having to move away from combat sequence and all of that. The more that happens, we realize how important that is to the
Mhm.
storytelling actually.
Sure.
To that it's like I feel like it's still covered, but I feel at this point now I know that the intent is just not gonna hit, and
Mhm.
that sucks. Because it's
Yeah.
like the intent of showing the insane violence that then makes him come to the realization is backed up by acts and us witnessing it and feeling it.
And the fact that the game does such an specifically two, one does a little bit, but two especially
Makes you feel
is the
like,
only game I have ever played where it actually does make you feel somewhat uncomfortable to kill random NPCs.
mm-hmm.
Not,
And,
not the infected, not the infected, but the
yeah.
humans. It's like that is why the game is so incredibly violent and so
Mm-hmm.
detailed in its gore,
Mm-hmm.
because it is supposed to make you uncomfortable to stab a human in the neck.
Yeah.
Even if they were trying to kill your character, you don't want to do that. It like and especially because it does the thing where they call each other by names.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just say there's something around the corner, go flank them. They say,
Uh-huh.
"Hey Jim, go get that.
Mm-hmm.
George, go that way.
Uh-huh.
Hey Bill, where are you?
Uh-huh.
Bill." Like number one, it created by far the most realistic AI I've ever seen. Like it's almost hard to believe how believable the AI was in that. Considering it was a PS5 game or PS4 game.
Yes.
Um,
That's still more
like
impressive than
it's
many
insane.
PS5
I'm like
games.
Jesus. But like them having names and I mean, you know, we haven't dealt with her killing any dogs, and I'm gonna guess that we won't. They're probably not gonna kill animals, but
Yes.
that game genuinely made you feel terrible for killing the dogs.
and
Like,
and that's the beauty,
if,
and that's the beauty. And if you felt that in the game, that helped inform the theme of
Mhm,
it, of its story. It was all a symphony of its
mhm,
different elements. And now I'm feeling that it's like we're being told about this thing, but we're not feeling it, and that
mhm,
is such a mistake. The show just feels so tame, and that
mhm,
tameness just really came to bear at a very important moment. That now that we're so close to the end, I just don't feel you're gonna land the ship in a way that's gonna make me
mhm.
satisfied,
Right.
regardless of how great
You
next
can't
season
ramp
is.
it up now. It has to be ramped up now, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's barely any time, and then you're gonna leave people stewing for like two
Mhm,
years on that, and that's just so unfortunate. Which
mhm.
I tell you, it's like I've been rewatching and catching up on Andor because the finale, the series ending is today.
Oh,
It's
I
not.
thought it was over already. I didn't realize it was still going on.
It ends today.
Gotcha.
The last three episodes drops today, and I'm like, I never thought I would say that the TV show that I'm enjoying most currently is a Star Wars show.
I've never watched it. I probably do need to because I have never heard a bad word about Andor. So
Yes, it's,
I probably do need to watch that
yeah, it's
sometime.
like Andor is literally just the very like because you can have your opinions about how badly Star Wars
Mm,
has gone. Many have those. I know you're
mm,
in that camp.
sure.
I feel there's been a few good. I mean, a lot of bad that's happened, but Andor is like legit. Like it's so.
I've heard many people, and by that I don't mean like two or three. I mean I'm talking a lot of people
Mhm.
have said they consider Andor to be amongst the very tip top of Star Wars
Yes,
content. So
and
I probably should
yeah,
watch it.
and recent and last week's batch of episodes, like that was masterful TV in a way that I never expected out of Star Wars. That then makes this shit
You're
stinks
right.
more because you know that
And
it.
meanwhile, like, and again, this is not to shit on Star
Uh
Wars necessarily, but like, this is an adaptation of a genuinely meaningful story. So
huh.
it's like that just amplifies how badly this has been handled.
Exactly. Because think about that. It's like there's a certain pointlessness about like doing a show about a random character that dies in a movie
Mm,
that was like a prequel to something, and you know they made it feel meaningful because it's
hmm
thematically rich. It's splendidly written for a series not known for its
hmm
writing. That
Right.
I feel that's coloring. Like I feel me experiencing like the recent highs of Andor and watching like the entire thing with Last of Us season 2 collapse right now was like the perfect storm for me. Like to have like the things be like, man, it's like this is not as great as I thought it was because when you watch True Greatness, you know, and us that when we play True Greatness,
hmm
we know, regardless
And
of
but
what
like,
bitches in the internet says about it.
oh sure. I think part of the reason maybe why I was harder on this show right off the bat than you were
Mm-hmm.
is I had also relatively recently played through the game, and
Mm-hmm.
I've played through it. I don't replay games very often, but I
Mm-hmm.
have played through both Last of Us's at least 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, I consider both of them amongst my very favorite games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I actually had I not only had it pretty fresh in my mind, but I know it pretty damn well. Like I said, I might be getting a couple moments mixed
Mm-hmm.
up as to when certain things happen, but like I do know the story pretty darn well, and like so every little change just was that much more obvious to me because
Mm-hmm.
it's like I don't care if you have them go to a convenience store instead of the library, right? That doesn't affect
Yeah.
anything.
The changes in the first season
But
were not.
when you change, well, I was referring to Last of Us
Mm-hmm.
season 2 here
Yeah.
because with now that said they changed Jesse or Dina to Jesse in this case, but
Mm-hmm.
something like that doesn't bother me, right? But you change like say the point of Tommy intentionally cutting Ellie's legs out from under her so that he can go get revenge while not her
Mm-hmm.
putting herself in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole point is that's why she was able to go, and you change it to this weird like them sneaking out, and then later Tommy comes anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it made way more sense in the game than what it does in the show. And it's like just
Exactly.
do that.
Yeah.
Why did you not just do that?
To me, it's like if you're not gonna have Tommy go because he specifically mentioned that, just don't have him go. Literally.
Yeah,
And that's kind of like that's a problem.
either commit to it and he stays in Jackson, or do what you already did in the game and make it
Yeah.
follow that path. I don't understand why they did what they did. I just
Yeah,
don't get
it's
it.
a weird indecision of wanting to change things but still trying to stay true. Is like you can't have it both ways, and this was the
Yeah,
time. And now 5 episodes in, 2 left. That is like shouldn't have been like this,
yeah.
and it's just sad because it's like I
The
had hope.
snowball has gotten too big now. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
that I cannot even ignore it at this point. So,
Hmm
but we'll see with the next 2 episodes. Let's see if next week's episode is as good as the early reviews said it was gonna be. I believe it, just by
Yeah,
it being a standalone thing. I
it's
want to see how.
it's gonna be the heaviest story, like the heaviest episode of just straight story
And
of the entire
and
season.
it's
So,
directed by Neil Druckmann. The only episode he directed this season.
oh, I
Next
thought
week.
he directed that one and the last one. I didn't realize it was just that one.
Yeah, he was just that one.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. Actually, I don't know about the finale.
I think he
Yeah,
did. I think I heard somewhere that he directed 2 episodes, and I thought they were the last two
yeah.
episodes.
I know he also wrote alongside Hallie Gross, who wrote the game.
But
Back
maybe
to
that's
them.
what I'm thinking. Actually, that could be
Yeah,
what I'm thinking of.
yeah. But Gene Park said that Neil directed this one.
Mm.
That's coming. He said he watched the whole season. He was like, tune in for next week. He literally after this week, he didn't say anything about this week. He was like, tune in to next week. You'll see. That's all he said. And I'm like, I know why you said it. I know why.
Yeah, I mean, I have zero doubt that's gonna be a good
Mhm.
episode, just because
Yeah.
we know what happens, and it's a good it's a good part of it. I
Yeah,
get
a good chunk of story and
yeah
emotions. Yeah.
yeah yeah, and it's it takes you on an emotional roller coaster when you take it all into account. Like it's happiness filled with complete despair and sadness too.
Yeah, and to me, like, what's so sad because it exemplifies that when Bella Ramsey was with Pedro Pascal, their dynamic worked for the show. Her without him, she's felt very like she has
She,
not been able to carry it.
yeah, and again, this is more than just hers just writing the two, but that they've turned Ellie into like this incompetent goofball,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, yeah, she's got a goofy sense of humor and she's a little bit weird, but it pretty well establishes she does that as a coping mechanism
Mm-hmm.
because she's actually a deeply troubled individual.
Mm-hmm.
And in Last of Us 2, yeah, she'll giggle at the stupid little jokes like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's pretty well focused on like just murdering everything in sight.
Yeah, and it's kind of
They
like
they they have really made her like not Ellie in this season at all. I don't understand why they wrote it the way they did.
yeah, and it's gonna cost them dearly because it's like you're not conveying like what should be the most important thing about the story, and I find it hard. It's gonna be very hard for me to believe that you'll be able to convey that overall, and the reaction to this week's episode I think says it all to me. That it's like by itself the episode was not bad, but all decisions kind of like makes it one. That's kind of like the irony.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like it's not like the episode itself is unwatchable. It's that it it's the culmination of screwing everything up at this point. And while it still is an okay and watchable thing,
yeah,
it's not acceptable.
It's hard not to be pissed.
It's not acceptable that this is what The Last of Us 2 is being adapted as, because that story just deserves much better than what it's being done as.
And to me, it's just wild that we know that it's like this is not just the creator has been overseeing this too.
Yeah, it is wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it's maybe, but I always kept saying that there's some stories that just work in one medium and may not work for the next. And it's probably just further
this always was going to be a difficult one to adapt. There was no question, but I do feel that the way they've chosen to adapt it probably was not the right way to go about it either.
Yeah, it's both. We knew it was going to be difficult, but also choices have been made. When we start thinking of different choices, that is like they shouldn't have been like they shouldn't have done this. I do wonder, even going all the way back to the red flag of the first episode. Imagine if we had never seen that funeral. Just imagine that.
It would completely change. Now I get. Well, no, you know what? If they didn't say anything, people that don't know the story would probably start watching season 3, assuming that you're going to still see a lot of Ellie, whereas you really won't see much of her, right? But it's right. It's part 2 of the game, if you want to call it that. Starts with punching you in the gut by going, "Hey, there is a reason why what happened, and if you're smart, you'll at least understand it." Now, there's a lot of not smart people out there who chose not to understand it, but that's a different story. And by showing that right off the bat, look, even Hogue, who is like one of the biggest haters of this story, said, "I do not think this was the right choice to open the show by showing this."
Yes, because
and it's like that should tell you. Even the guy who doesn't like the story knows that was a mistake. Those of us who love the story know damn well that was a mistake. And it's like that should tell you everything you need to know right there.
Because it's like that's when you realize that it's like a big driver of the story was the mystery of who were these people, why did they do this?
Right.
Out of all the people that Joel could have wronged, who were these people?
You just kind of assume that they were fireflies looking for revenge, and it's like, oh no, there was much deeper reasoning to this. Not that we have to beat around the bush, because you know what it is already. They've already said it, and also, if I'm not mistaken, in the game, I don't believe Ellie ever finds out that the reason Abby killed Joel was because the surgeon was her father. Nora told her in this episode. It's like,
yes, literally that never happens.
Yeah. I don't believe that Ellie ever actually finds out that was why Abby did that.
I need to replay that. I think it's time for me to replay that game more deeply because like I need to kind of like realize, because I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's like she only knows that they're fireflies.
She knows they were fireflies, and she knows that they're like. I think she just assumes that they're looking for revenge because of Joel's warpath, basically. Yeah, I don't believe she ever finds out. I think she just assumes they were fireflies. That's all. So it's like,
she knows it's fireflies because Nora tells them. It tells her that it's fireflies in the like
In
that,
the game she does, you mean?
yes,
Or
yes.
okay,
This is
okay.
the moment. This is like if you were still oblivious and didn't know that this group was the fireflies. This was the
Mm,
moment in the game that you learn as a player. Like at least the game finally tells you, it's like, yeah, we're former fireflies. Like here,
mm,
and because it's like, don't you know what he did, what Joel did? That's like kind of like the only thing
mm.
that you knew at this point. So at this point, you probably would start thinking, or at least start imagining, as like, oh, if they're fireflies,
Well, I mean,
I got it.
from minute one of when they were attacking Joel, I kind of assumed that that's what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously there's more to it than just being fireflies. But then her specifically saying the surgeon that Joel killed was
Yeah,
Abby's
no,
father. It's like why would you even do that? Like why would you add
I
that
guess
to this?
already telling you everything, and that to me is like so bad,
But
such bad storytelling.
it just it was done so bad.
Because it's like now like they're trying to make Ellie just like a psycho of like oh yeah, it's like doesn't matter that she killed a surgeon. It's like
All right.
it's already putting blatantly telling you a bunch of all of this stuff that is like how are you gonna be able to make the point then
Mm-hmm.
that you eventually kind of get to? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like my base, and that's kind of where I want to end this.
Yeah.
And this one before we keep on rambling because this was the one I was
Well,
like,
like I said, I am surprised that we're pretty in line on this. I did not think we were going to be. I thought you were going to tell me you liked it. I was really surprised
yes,
at the start there that you said you did not. I'm like, huh.
yes. There's like and I tell you, it didn't help that rewatching Andor at the same time is like, this is what greatness is. This is really, and this is what we don't have right
Hmm.
now. So bad. Do you agree? Disagree? Let us know somewhere if you get to catch this episode because I know there's a bunch of you, but you can always catch us here every week as we finish digesting this last few episodes every week here at the X Button, and on top of our normal gaming podcast that posts every Fridays from 10 a.m. onwards, depending on my internet. Where Rick was here last weekend, Paul, my other co-host, was gonna be here this week, but things happen and he's gonna punt a week, and Rick's gonna come back. You're gonna hear us again, and like we haven't had enough podcasting time
You
already.
can't get rid of me
I know.
anymore.
But hey, it's better than the alternative. That's all I'll say. And I'll catch you until when we record our normal episode, Rick, and everyone else. If you agree or disagree, give us a like and subscribe here in our YouTube channel. And see you next week. Play some games. Enjoy that we're literally in the middle of the summer and
Press X.
to play. Hasta la vista, baby.